Hello, everybody. Welcome to a new episode of the Dissenter. I'm your host, Ricardo Lopes, and today I'm joined by Dr. Ruth Feldman. She is the Simms-Mann Professor of Developmental Social Neuroscience at the Interdisciplinary Center, Herzlia, with joint appointment at the Yale Child Study Center. With degrees in music composition, neuroscience, clinical psychology, and developmental psychology and psychopathology, her approach integrates perspectives from neuroscience, human development, philosophy, clinical practice, and the arts within an interpersonal frame and a behavior-based approach. Her conceptual model on biobehavioral synchrony systematically describes our lived experience within close relationships, builds brains, creates relationships, confers resilience, and promotes creativity. Her studies were the first to detail the role of oxytocin in the formation of human social bonds. Her studies often follow children from infancy to adulthood, address topics that are highly relevant to the general public, and receive substantial media attention. Dr. Feldman is a fellow of the Association for Psychological Science and received multiple awards, including a Rothschild Award, a NARSAD Independent Investigator Award twice, the Zeskind Award for Best Paper in Biological Psychiatry, and the Graven's Award for Research on High-Risk Infants. So, Dr. Feldman, thank you a lot for taking the time to come on the show.
Gladly, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So, so basically today we're going to talk about topics related to human bonding, right? The neurobiology of attachment, what's behind it, like for example the oxytocin system that is very ancient, evolutionarily speaking, the role of biobehavioral synchrony, and also what happens when parent-offspring bonding is for some reason disrupted, and what happens on the level of development for the child and then the adult and so on. So let's start with the neurobiology of attachment. So what could you tell us about this? What is behind this system of attachment?
Right. So I think we could start by asking, let's say we study attachment, or even broadly speaking, we study love. And love is not a negligible topic in human life. You will ask anyone, what is the most important thing for you? I would say more than 90% of the people worldwide will describe their attachment. The people they love, their children, their partners, their parents, their close friends, their group, as the most important thing in their life. So love is a very ancient topic that thinkers have been pondered about since, the ancient Greek, the biblical writers, whatever. It's in every culture. The recent focus on the science of love is novel. I would say is not more than maybe a decade or 2 decades. What is the biological underpinnings of love, of the human capacity to love or to attach exclusively to other humans? And the question is why we need to study love from a scientific perspective. What does it add? Love has been celebrated in art and in poetry. I mean, since the clay painting of the first hominin. So what it would give us more about love? What would we know more about love if we study it from a scientific perspective, if we understand what are the brain systems that sustain it, or what are the neurobiological systems that make it happen, or what are the processes that are critical, and what are the processes when they are disrupted, what are the consequences. So I think one global topic for me is a philosophical topic, because I think the most ancient question in the understanding of human nature is the body, mind, God, nature, is that schism between the mental and the physical. And that love stands exactly at that crossroad between the lofty, the mental, the spiritual, and the physical, the biological. And I think every generation takes a different perspective on the body-mind question. You know, the Enlightenment started with Descartes and a whole new schism of body and mind. And I think in the second part of the 20th century, there has been some kind of integration. It's like back to Spinoza, that God and nature, body and mind are not so distinct. They are one and the same. They are two sides of the same coin, that our mind is embedded and our body has mind. You can't separate the two. And I think our research works along that line. And in our generation, that ancient question of the body and the mind translates into the question of brain and mind. You know, what is the brain? What is the mind? How could you describe in neurobiological terms the experiences of a living human? And I think taking the lens of the neurobiology of attachment or the neurobiology of love is a good and current lens on that age-old question of body and mind. So the approach is indeed more Spinozistic than Cartesian, and more integrative than towards the schism. And love really is the place where we begin with the mammalian condition, that human or mammals are born with an immature brain, and their brain develops in the context of the mother's body and caregiving behavior. So caregiving, love, affection, to one mature individual caring for an immature individual, and that the brain, all the brain systems develop within this context, is part of the mammalian condition, and it's not separate into, you know, obviously there's the lower and the higher system, the body and the mind, but this viewpoint gives us an integrated look on what love is. It doesn't allow us to take the physical out of the mental and the lofty, but it integrates them into one. And it also puts human along a very, particularly the study of what we call the affiliative brain, or the brain basis of attachment, that begins with a parental brain and then becomes the brain system that sustain all human relationship, and the oxytocin system, which, as you said, is a very ancient system. And when we see how that system evolved and how much it sustains in human sociality, the capacity for love, the capacity for resonating with others, the capacity to empathize with the feeling and mental states of others, we feel very rooted in a long line of animal evolution. You know, it really gives you a certain perspective that humans do have obviously unique abilities, but they are part of nature. They are part of nature, from the most simple organisms to the most complex ability, and it's all one long continuum. So for me, those insights, or looking at the oxytocin system and at the maternal brain and at those biological system or processes that enable us to attach or support attachment, really puts you in a long line of other humans, other animals, nature with a capital N. I think this is an answer to the question of why to study the science of love, or what it gives us. And if we look at, in general, I think we're talking about two systems and one process that are the basis of our capacity for affiliation or for love, of any love. The two systems that we're examining one is the oxytocin system. The oxytocin system is a very integrative system, and it crosstalks with many other systems. So, for instance, love, both parental love and pair bonding, involves the crosstalk in very particular neurons in the nucleus accumbens and striatum of oxytocin and dopamine. Oxytocin crosstalk with the amygdala in forming social memories of the attachment target. Oxytocin talks with the immune system, and this is why relationships are good for us physically. When you say it's good to be in love, this really is that it's good for your health, because oxytocin boosts your immune system. So the oxytocin system is not a single system. It's a system who's played a very important role throughout evolution. Initially, its role was to enable organisms to manage life in harsh ecologies. And with the evolution of mammals, oxytocin became embedded into the mammalian condition. Mammals are termed for viviparity, being born and being nursed. So oxytocin is the system that is implicated in uterine contraction and in milk letdown, in those very functions that spell the evolution of mammals. So oxytocin was there before, became embedded into the mammalian condition, and with the evolution of mammal became something very interesting, that stress is managed through attachment. First, through your attachment with your mother. This relationship builds the stress management system, and then through other relationships. So oxytocin is a very interesting system that enables you to manage hardship through relationship, through affiliation and love. So the oxytocin system is a very wide and broad and fundamental system. So this is one system implicated in affiliation and love. The other one is the maternal brain, or the brain basis of attachment, or the brain basis of affiliation. We call it the affiliative brain. So this is a set of network where research in rodents from the 50s or 60s described this subcortical network that enabled rodent mothers to take care of their infants, particularly the link between the oxytocin-producing hypothalamus, the amygdala, that make mother very vigilant about their infant safety, and the striatum, that make the infant the most rewarding object for the parent. And on top of that subcortical system that enable mammals to parent, humans evolved several higher order systems that enable parents to be empathic, to simulate the infant's emotion in their own brain, to mentalize, to infer infants' intention from action. For instance, parents know quite quickly if the infant cries, if he's hungry or dirty or tired or wants something. Okay, so you can infer with those brain systems up to the highest order, latest evolving frontal systems that enable parents to multitask and then plan parenting according to their culture and embed the child in their culture, in their meaning system, in their folklore, in their spiritual or religious beliefs and habits, etc. So all this network, the subcortical network that sustain mammalian parenting. And the more complex cortical networks that evolved in human are all connected into one global neural network. We call it the human caregiving network or the affiliative brain. And this brain develops during sensitive period in infancy, the first couple of months in infancy. Mothers have it immediately after birth. Fathers have it in as much as they will take care of the baby. And then the babies develop it through caregiving, through synchrony. And this system, this network that you develop as an infant within the context of parental caregiving will be the system that you will later on use. You know, it will be triggered, it will be ignited when you form close friendships, and eventually when you fall in love, and then eventually when you need to parent your own children. So it's the same system that was initiated by the oxytocin during pregnancy and childbirth, or even lactation, and formed that brain system in the baby. And that brain system during that sensitive period would then be used throughout life in other attachment. So we're talking about these two systems, the affiliative brain and the oxytocin system, and we're talking about the process of synchrony, that process of non-verbal, behavioral, and physiological connection between parent and child that make two humans into one biobehavioral system. And that happens between parents and children, it happens between friends, it happens between lovers, and then eventually the child would take it to parent their own children.
Mm-hmm. So it's because this system of attachment that we have serves different purposes and functions. I mean, it's not only to create the bonding between parent and offspring, but we also use it to develop friendships and romantic attachments and so on, that if it gets disrupted while it is developing and structuring, later on in life, if the parent-offspring bonding gets disrupted, then the child might develop into someone who might have difficulty establishing proper relationships with other people. Is that correct?
Right. So here, yes, what you say is correct. You know, evolution is very economic. If you can make a system work with 3 elements, you're not going to use 30 elements. So if you can have love evolve with 2 or 3 systems or 1 and 2 processes, these are the processes that with various variations would be used for all the attachment. And I think this is fascinating because it tells us that really there is something uniform about love. And it comes in many forms. And in humans, because we have such a great cortex and so many abstraction capacities, human can take the neurobiology of love and expand them to humankind, because those same system and those same processes of synchrony work even when you meet someone that you're not in love with and you get into a conversation with them. You begin to synchronize your gaze and you take turn in conversation. And if the conversation was very friendly and very pleasant, there will be an oxytocin response to it. So there's an abstraction from the mother-infant bond to humankind. And even same system work in people's attachment to their pets. Same system work when people attach to abstract idea like a sports team or a homeland or any kind of abstract idea, and even affiliation to as abstract idea as God or whatever. But those use the same system that were built in the mother-infant bond through daily predictable caregiving that involved synchrony, attentiveness, and bodily contact. And yes, if this is not put in place early on, there is a much greater risk that things will get disrupted. And what will get disrupted is these social emotional systems, not motor systems. Children who had bad attachment, for instance, they had depressed mothers, or they had very high level of contextual adversity, poverty, immigration, etc. They will learn to walk. They will learn to run. Most likely they would learn to read. But those abilities that are sustained by the affiliative brain are at much greater risk to be disrupted. The capacity for empathy, the capacity for love, and there are reports that, for instance, children who grew up with chronically depressed mothers report much greater social loneliness as adults. Mm-hmm. So there's something about the ability to attach, which is the risk.
Mm-hmm. So at a certain point you've alluded there to synchrony. Could you tell us what biobehavioral synchrony is about, what it is based on, and why it is so important to sustain these parent-offspring bondings?
Right. So the definition of synchrony is the coordination of behavioral and physiological processes between parent and child during moments of social contact. So let's say a mother or a father interact with a baby and they coordinate their nonverbal behavior. They look at them in coordination, they smile together, they co-vocalize, they touch the infant while they're both looking, and they also attentive to signs of shutdown, aversion. Let's say when the baby averts their gaze, the parent wait. They don't keep on stimulating. And those rhythms that establish this dyad-specific attachment are very important because we found in many studies that those precious moments of synchrony, and they occur no longer that several seconds, at top 2-3 minutes in early infancy, they provide the template for the coordination of biological processes. So during those moments of synchrony, when parent and infant coordinate their gaze or laugh together or co-vocalize, there's a coordination between their heart rate, their coordination between their brain waves, there's a coordination between their oxytocin release. There are all those environment-dependent systems that support attachment are built during those moments when the mature brain externally regulates the immature brain, the baby's brain, and it's like the mature brain tunes the infant brain to social life, to life in the social ecology. And this is why synchrony is so critical. And it's critical that infants experience it in the first 9 months of life, the first stage of maturation of the social brain, before language begins. Because those are the first communication before you go higher system and begin to communicate meaning. You communicate just the ebb and flow of social connectedness without any meaning. Sharing gaze, taking turns, laughing together, enjoying social interaction. For instance, we have intervention that we developed for depressed moms, and we make sure to give it before 9 months. We teach mothers how to be, because we think this is going to give the infant the experience of synchrony before the brain goes on to the next stage. Okay? Now, synchrony expands with time. It is built on nonverbal relationship, but as we follow children, we have now children that we follow them for 24 years, and you see that early synchrony expands to include more and more complex abilities. So when the child is, let's say, 1.5 years, you begin to co-construct symbolic play acts. You play with a doll, you play with a bear, you play with a telephone, but those plays that involve symbol also have those human nonverbal communication signals. Children grow older, there's the ability to be empathic to each other, there's the ability to take multiple perspectives between adolescent and their parents, and up till adult-adult relationship between a 20-year-old and his mother, that when the relationship was good, there's the ability to mutual self-disclosure and the ability to construct empathy and see the other side. But all of these are built on the nonverbal dance or rhythm of the first months of life. So synchrony is a very important process that provides this template or framework for the coordination of two separate biologies into one biology, two separate brains that can tick together as one brain.
Mm-hmm. So in your work you also talk about different conditions that might disrupt this normal development of the brain and of the brain bases of attachment, let's say, and you talk about, for example, maternal postpartum depression, premature birth and the consequences that might have, and chronic early stress and trauma. So could you tell us how each of those events might disrupt the normal development of the child and then the consequences later on in their lives that might have?
Right. So when we, in our work, when we realized how important synchrony is and how important it is to experience synchrony during the first months of life, we started asking what happens to the child's brain. And we're talking about a brain that is born healthy. We're not talking about a brain that was born with some kind of a severe pathology, like an autistic brain that even with the best parenting would have a hard time developing social ability, or someone with a severe mental retardation. So we're talking about a brain that was born with a good potential. What could be the conditions that are related to disruption of bonding? So one is premature birth. Let's say a child is born prematurely, and normally the child has to go from the mother's womb to the mother arm. The mother should be able to hold the baby, and these babies are taken out of their mother's hands, put into incubators for whatever period of time. And we know from animal research that this maternal separation is very detrimental precisely to those systems that enable pups to manage stress, to attend, to explore, to bond, etc. So prematurity is one condition. It's not a negligible condition. It affects between 10 and 11% of all birth in Western society. The other condition is when the mother is present physically but not present emotionally, and this is maternal postpartum depression. This is a condition that every 5 years, when the statistics come out, we see that in industrial societies, number keep increasing. So right now, latest statistics is between 15 and 18% of mothers after birth experience severe enough symptoms to merit the diagnosis of axis 1 depression. So we're talking about a lot of women, like every 1 in 6. So the mother is there, but she's not able to synchronize. Usually her oxytocin system is shut down. There's something about, she's not drawing a reward from the infant. She can't turn to the infant. She can't understand the infant signals. Most of the times these mothers don't even engage in face-to-face interaction with a baby, even if they care for the baby's needs. So there's postpartum depression. And the third condition is when the environment is too disruptive for the mother, even if this mother under normal condition would attend to the baby, but the environment is too hazardous. We study we studied for the past 16 years a sample in the south of Israel that's been continuously exposed to war-related trauma, but we're talking about all other kind of trauma like immigration, poverty, food and shelter insecurity, and here we're talking about millions of children globally. I mean, according to a recent UNICEF report, is 1 in 5 children worldwide is subjected to immigration, deportation, insecurity, environmental, what we call early life stress. So all those conditions do not enable that kind of stability, calm relationship between a mother and child. And we started from birth or from infancy in each of these cohorts. And we have each of these cohorts running. The kangaroo care cohort is now 20 years old, and the postpartum depression cohort and the war-related trauma cohort are 16 years old. So we follow them for 16 to 20 years, and we see how those disruptions really impact the development of the child's brain later on, the development of the child's oxytocin system, the immune system, the stress response, the child's difficulty in forming social synchrony with friends and with the peer group, a lot more symptoms, psychopathology symptoms, a lot more disruptive symptoms. So we see the direct result on brain development, child's oxytocin response, and on physical and mental health.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, with all of this knowledge, are there any interventions that have been developed to try to prevent these sorts of things, or even if not preventing, if those things happen, are there anything that we can do to improve those children's development?
Right. So what we did with the postpartum depression is that we took this 16 year of research, we condensed it to intervention of 8 sessions, and we're now giving this intervention to depressed moms in the home before the child is 9 months of age. So we teach them how to synchronize, and we teach them how to touch the baby, because affectionate touch elicits oxytocin, and oxytocin would elicit the reward system, and mothers would be more inclined to approach the baby. We teach them what it means to be intrusive parenting and how to prevent it. We really literally build a program. We teach the mother what does it mean to have mentalization and keep the child in your mind, because this is something that is very difficult for depressed moms. So this is one intervention that can happen early on. But I think many children and many mothers do not get this intervention before the end of the first year. And then the question is, what happens later on? Can we do something when we have a child of 6 or 7 or 8 or 10 or 15, or even an adult who grew up not in those positive systems? So you go into a very, very interesting question that we're now putting a lot of effort into, and it's the neurobiology of resilience. Because what you see is very interesting is that when you follow those children at risk, let's say the preemies, or the children who grew up with constant war, or the children who developed with a chronically depressed mothers, not all children have the same psychopathology. Not all children do not develop the affiliative brain. There's some who do, obviously much greater proportion, and some who don't. And you wonder, what are the components of those who are resilient? What why were they able to be resilient even if, and this is interesting because resilient children they have better social abilities, inborn probably, and they're able to recruit synchrony from other people in their environment. Mm-hmm. So you see those children, let's say in the kindergarten, some children just have those social abilities to, have the teacher care for them, or elicit father, or find a grandparent, and because the human brain is so plastic, mm-hmm. you can have synchrony from other adults in your life that would, some children, their oxytocin system for some genetic reason works better than others. Some children form close friendships, and those friendships, particularly in middle and late childhood, let's say age 8 to 10, having a social group, a very close-knit social group, let's say in the context of early life stress, is very helpful. So here you see that variation in those systems that sustain love mm-hmm. are very important for resilience, to get you out of a early stress condition to a better trajectory.
Mm-hmm. So there aren't any interventions that we know about that might improve the lives of older people that went through some sort of attachment disruption, like for example in the case of adolescents or adults?
I'm sure there are, and many therapeutic approaches, maybe a second or third wave psychoanalysis or integrative, or are attachment based. They are formulated not on the neuroscience of attachment, but they are formed on Bowlby and attachment theory's principle that the most important component after traumatic childhood is to form a close, trusting, stable relationship with someone, let's say with a therapist. So these are actually what this does, and we, in our new studies, we're looking at it, is that when you have a synchronous, reciprocal, respectful relationship with a therapist, you begin to produce oxytocin after sessions when there were empathy, or you felt that you were being heard or resonated with. So this is basically going back to the same, and there are some studies showing that good therapy can activate the same systems in the affiliative brain. So even if you didn't get it early on, you can get it in therapy through that process of synchrony and respect and mutuality. And those somehow, or for some individuals, can tick the same systems again. It's important to say that those systems are very plastic in humans. Mm-hmm. And it's not like you didn't get it as a baby, you will never get them again. There are chances. Every close relationship is also an opportunity for the reorganization of these systems. And that's the beauty of it, because even if you didn't have such great parenting, but you were able to form a good relationship, a good loving relationship, a good partner relationship, there is an opportunity lying within this relationship that over time you will be able to reorganize those very plastic systems.
Mm-hmm. So when you were talking about the neurobiology of resilience, I'm not sure if this is right, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't it then the case that there is an innate element in terms of individual differences, in terms of predisposition toward suffering more or less negative effects from attachment disruption, or predisposition toward resilience?
Right. I would say that if we look at resilience in the context of what I've just said, in the context of the mammalian condition, that you're born with an immature brain, and human brain is the most immature of all mammals, and your brain is shaped by the brain of another brain. And those systems sustain resilience, the oxytocin system and the affiliative brain and the synchronous process. Some children are born with more functional oxytocin system by genetics. There are greater receptor organization in the brain, better plasticity, better brain plasticity. Sociality is a very well-known temperamental disposition. Take 10 kids and you can easily rate them on sociality. Some are more predisposed to form relationship, have better skill in it, and some are more loners, and everywhere they go they don't find friends, it doesn't suit them, and there are others who would. So there are individual differences, temperamentally born differences, biological differences in those systems that would enable you to function better even under harsh conditions. But it doesn't mean that, children who are born with the more negative temperament cannot be assisted if we know what to work on. So if we know that synchrony or sociality is the key for resilience, it's possible to teach those children how to activate the oxytocin system.
Mm-hmm. I understand. I mean, do you know what are the earliest stages of development where we can already observe these temperamental differences, these temperamental innate differences between children?
Well, so it's for various temperamental dimension, let's say activity level, which is the most stable temperamental disposition. Children are born with, they're either more active or less active, and they stay like this throughout their life. It's very consistent. That you can detect in utero, 5th or 6 months of gestation. You could see, every mother who had more than one pregnancy could tell you that this one was more or less active during pregnancy. So that could be sociality. I think could be detected in the first 5-6 months of life. 3, 4, 5, 6. Some children orient more to face than others. Some children enjoy more social interaction, even as babies. So there are different, the dimension of regulation, which is very, very critical for resilience, the ability to self-regulate or to self-soothe. I would say in the first months of life, you see very great differences in the infant's abilities to self-soothe, to regulate, how regulated sleep and wake cycles are, how regulated feeding is. So I would say within the first 6 months of life, we can detect very many. Maybe things change later on for some children, but we have pretty good estimate for most temperamental disposition. And I would certainly think that next generation interventions for parents and children should take temperament, particularly the capacity, the plasticity, the capacity to regulate, because plasticity is the core component of resilience, the ability to recalibrate, to jump up after adversity. This is resilience. And some children are better able to recalibrate after a big noise when they're 2 months old. So those abilities, if we can expand them, knowing the child's innate disposition, but, stretching them, I think this would be the next generation of intervention, taking into consideration. It's not intervention. Promoting resilience is certainly not a one-size-fits-all. It has to be tailored to the temperament of the mother, of the child, of the goodness of fit between them. And
So just one last question. Are there any important sex differences that we have to take into account when thinking about all of these processes of development?
So I would say the first major sex difference is between mothers and fathers. You know, it's like what mothers give and what fathers give to the baby. And the notion that only mothers are biologically programmed to care for babies is no longer true. Mm-hmm. What we know is that mothers and fathers develop the parental brain, the affiliative brain, via different experiences. So mothers develop it via the hormones of pregnancy, childbirth, lactation. And fathers, let's say mothers get it for free. They get it by the virtue of them having gone through pregnancy and childbirth. Fathers don't. So in fathers, there's a great variability. Either you will take care of the infant and get yourself involved in infant care and your brain would light up, or you'd be what we call high-tech dad. You'll see the child for 5 minutes before he goes to sleep and a little bit on the weekend. And then parenting will pass you by. You won't have the reorganization. However, at the end of the day, mothers and fathers do build the child's brain and oxytocin system and resilience and regulation through the same components: synchrony and warmth and reciprocity and external regulation of the adult brain of the immature infant's brain. So they provide the same processes via different avenues, and their effects are also a little bit different. Fathers enable you to manage aggression and dialogue conflicts, and mothers teach you to be a good social member when it's good. So basically you need both. So this obviously there are the differences of the effects of adversity on males and females. It would be, and this is a very general statement, it doesn't apply for every child, that boys of depressed moms or boys growing up in adversity will develop more externalizing, disruptive, inattentive disorders, and girls tend to develop more anxious, withdrawn, depressed psychopathology. But again, there are variations, so this is importance. And also the notion that there is importance besides mother-father effect on boy and girl, there is the gender matching. So there's a specific effect of fathers and boys. Fathers are critical for the boy's brain to learn regulation. And there's a specific effect of mother and girls. Mothers are specifically important for tuning the daughter's brain to social interaction. So there's not just the parent gender differences, the child gender differences, but there's also the relationship that are the gender matching relationship and the gender mismatching. And in health, both a little boy and a little girl require good synchrony with both the gender matching parent and the gender mismatching parent. And each, opens up a whole world that you can synchronize with people who are exactly like you, who are a little bit different from you, who are a bit different from you, and that, for the expanding capacity for empathy.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so Dr. Feldman, just before we go, would you like to tell people what are the best places on the internet for them to find and learn a little bit more about your work? And I don't know if you want to leave a last message or something like that.
Well, the last message is also the first message. Attachment is extremely important. And if you are going to get yourself involved in one thing you do in life, this should be the thing. And I would say all of our work and our papers appear in our website. So maybe if you'd like to to put in the website, and I think people could read our paper.
Okay, so I will be including links to that and to your work in the description box of the interview, Dr. Feldman, for people to go and check it out because it's very interesting. And again, thank you a lot for taking the time to come on the show, and it was a real pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Hi everybody, thank you for watching this interview until the end. As you might have noticed, I've started this channel in February 2018 and have been putting out regular interviews with academics and intellectuals from a variety of fields. To keep the channel sustainable, I would like to ask you to please visit my Patreon page and to consider making a pledge there. If you don't like Patreon, you also have the alternatives of Subscribestar and PayPal. All of the links are in the description box of the video. Otherwise, and if you like what I'm doing, please share it, leave a like and hit the subscription button. I would also like to give a huge thank you to my patrons: Karen Litske, Anne Blanchett, Perel Galarsen, Lau Guerrero, Chantal Gelinas, Francis Ford, Hans Frederick Sunda, Brian Rivera, Lucas Stafiniak, Sergio Gondriano, Jana Eninen, Ricardo Vladimiro, Craig Healy, John Connors, Adam Castle, Vega Gidi, Doctors Jerry Muller, Herbert Gintis, Rutger Voss and Bo Weingard, and also my 3 producers, Isar Webb, Rosie and Jim Frank. Thank you for all.